Good morning, Internet. I am Ryan Ingram, and this is the Friday morning real estate chat where I do my very best to answer all of the questions that you may or may not have. So, I have spent the past couple of minutes trying to figure out how to get the better camera to work. It's really hit or miss. So, I was not able to get it up and running, but this webcam is just as sufficient, I suppose. So, sorry for being a little bit late, but I really appreciate when that camera decides to work because the video quality is just a little bit better. And subsequently, it makes it a little bit more palatable on the rewatches. But hey, I guess the same information is the same information. So while you may not be able to see me as clear, the knowledge that I think I have is the same, regardless of the clarity of picture. So let's see. I have had a really big week, and I continue to be really excited going into the weekend. So let me go ahead and get everything set up. Let's get those disclaimers rolling, posting the questions in the chat. Anything that you might have, I'm going to go ahead and I see that the walls behind me are extraordinarily bright. So I'm going to jump off screen for just a second and fix these lights. All right, now all the pretty colors are here. So now we can really have a party. All right. Well, let's go ahead and talk about the week that I have had. Let me get everybody all caught up. We're currently working through a small issue with one of the properties that we're supposed to purchase. The seller was not satisfied with their net, which, well, it's really not my issue. You know, we've already got the contract. I would rather I'd rather pay a few extra $100 and close today than not close today. All right. So let's go ahead. I'm going to tell you everything that I've done this week. Get you all caught up since the last time that we've met. So last week we closed on 4 properties, which brought us to having purchased 26 properties so far this year. I made a little Instagram post with photos and really big numbers on the properties that we just purchased. So today we are going to close on 5 properties, and that will bring us to 31 properties that we've purchased so far this year. So we are still a little bit behind, but barely. Well, I guess when you think about them as standalone homes, we are pretty far behind. But if we are actually going to buy 200 homes this year, then that comes out to be about 17 per month. So January passed, we purchased 11 properties. February passed, and we purchased 15 properties. And so far in March, we have purchased 4. Well, after today, we'll have purchased 4, which brings us to 31. So we should be at 34 right now and a clean slate going into March. But since we aren't there, what I guess what I really need to do is just do our very best to end March with 48 properties, which would be us purchasing, you know, 17 more. That math is wrong. 17 times 3 is 54. So we need to end March with 54 properties to be on pace to buy 200 over the next year. But at the same time, from what I've heard from realtors that have been around for quite some time, in these winter months, kind of the January or really like December through March are pretty slow. And I've heard that from middle of March to the rest of the year, people will start posting a lot more homes and just start trying to get out and about because it has been very cold and it's been pretty snowy. So, one of the questions that I've talked about on several occasions is, since this market is increasing so much, people that haven't yet purchased rental properties are trying to figure out if they should invest in rental properties here in 2022 because the market is heating up. And when I say heating up, there are a lot of buyers out there. The prices for homes have drastically increased. 2017, we regularly were all in on properties at $40,000. And now properties that need full rehabs are listing for about 40,000. So 40,000 seems to be the new floor, whereas just a couple of years ago, $40,000 would get you a perfect recently renovated home. So the market has gone up tremendously, but I think this is just real estate investing. And I think this is just what it looks like. So I would say that it's still a fantastic time to get involved in real estate. There's an old proverb. I can't remember if it's like a Chinese, Japanese proverb. It's definitely not biblical, but it says, the best time to plant a tree is 10 years ago. The second best time is today. So I think that's the trend that real estate is going to continue to follow. So we have seen dramatic increases in housing prices. And even if there were a correction, the correction wouldn't be as severe as the increases that we've seen recently. So I think homes are up, I don't know, maybe about 40%. I know just personally, we have started buying properties for closer to 60, 70,000. Whereas, historically, even last year, we were buying them for around 50. So in some regards, the market has increased tremendously. And if we were to experience a correction, I think 20, 30% decrease, you would still be, for any length of time, if you purchased a property last year or the year before, even if the market does take a sharp decline, you're still going to be in the clear. You're not going to be underwater yet. So what I'm getting at is, if you're in this for the long haul, then a slight correction is in no way going to hurt you financially, especially if you are in a position where you already have long-term financing on the property. So I think as soon as the correction happens, it's going to be tough for people that have short-term money out, people that are doing home flips that need that top line ARV. If you're currently like in the middle or planning a refinance and the market corrects, then you're going to have to adjust. But if you have a 20, 30-year time horizon that you're solving for, then I think now is still a good time to get into real estate. Because long term, if the market does correct, which I really don't think it will, then you're still going to be okay. With labor costs continuing to go up, with material costs continuing to go up, and the material shortages, the supply chain and whatnot, building new is becoming more difficult and more costly. The inventory of existing properties is really low, also causing a also causing a price increase. So even if interest rates go up, then that would only limit the amount of buyers looking for properties. So the people that are barely financially able to buy a property, that will probably take them out of the equation. But the people that are financially sound are still going to be in the market looking for properties because, from a long term perspective, it's only going to go up. So, all in all, always be buying real estate. It's like Alec Baldwin and Glengarry Glen Ross. Always be closing, always be buying rental. What's the best way to research your market? I would say the best way to research a market is likely just driving through it excessively, figuring out what areas you like and why, and what areas you dislike and why. I think that while it still exists, the Trulia crime map is pretty helpful for you to get a feel for areas before you start driving around. I think that figuring out what areas law enforcement has the most difficulty with is probably a good idea. And on top of that, I would say getting with the municipalities and looking at their websites and figuring out what projects they're focusing on, what parts of town, if they are doing anything with infrastructure, where that is, and figure out how to invest near that. So we've got one section in the area, Salem Avenue, and that is getting a lot of attention. They're putting a lot of money on that. They call it a corridor. So I would say buying there is a good idea by and large because that's where the city is putting a lot of money to clean it up. That's where they've had some good commercial movement where some marketplaces have gone in. So figuring out where the money is going, and you could do that by driving around as well, just figuring out where new construction is going up, where roads are being worked on, if buildings are being built. That's the same as new construction that I already said. Renovations, you can see where a lot of properties are being renovated. Really just finding the action and getting close to it. And then trying to figure out and project, is that going to continue to be the case? Because if something is already happening, then you're kind of, from a reaction perspective, buying there. But if you can, I guess, get wind from the city about a project that they're going to start, like if you know they're going to start working on an area, then likely homes are still going to be cheaper in that area that you can invest in before they break ground on investing the city or the taxpayers' dollars in that area. So that would be a solid idea. As far as like sifting through a bunch of metrics, like you see some people talk about, or if you read, like the Cushman Wakefield stuff, where they take tons of demographic information, new jobs information, employment, population growth versus population decline, all of that. I've never gotten into it, and I don't really have any interest in it, so I don't have much advice from that perspective. It's never really interested me, and I just think by and large, if you are looking to invest in real estate over, the 30-year period, it's really difficult to make a mistake. So if you have a house and somebody is going to want to live in that area, then you've got a good investment. And then being speculative on the appreciation, sure, that might get you a couple extra dollars, but by and large, the analysis on hand of the cash flow and the principal pay down and the tax benefits are plenty enough. Appreciation is nice when it occurs, but it's also completely speculative. And it's the part that even if you have all of those metrics, the variables are all so interdependent on one another that it's borderline impossible to predict unless you look at, you know, the things that are less likely to go awry. Like if you get wind of a big development going in from like a private business where you hear of some big developer wanting to build a golf course and they bought a lot of land to do so, there are a lot of things that could go wrong in that development to make it never come to fruition. However, if the government says that they're going to put, you know, $10 million into the infrastructure in this area, then because it's the taxpayer dollars, there's very little that can go wrong. So that's another point that I would look at. Thanks for doing these live chats. I love the community involvement. Thanks, man. I appreciate you being on here. Depends on how high the internet rates go. Banker says no limit on how high it can go. Well, we're still at the historic low of interest rates. So sure, if it goes up a little bit, you're going to start limiting the buyer pool. But I don't think that increased interest rates are going to bring down housing prices from where they are. And if you look at the increase that we have experienced, like we just got a round of appraisals in for a refinance that we're doing. And some of these properties that we have purchased for $40,000 are appraising for like 120. So if you've got solid comps of, you know, $120,000 homes at this point, you know, if the property falls to 80,000, you know, that's a sharp decline, but you're still north of 40,000. And I don't think interest rates alone are going to be are ever going to be to a point where they can cause it to crash to a point where, you know, we're seeing these $40,000 prices again. I think, you know, Dayton has been depressed for so long that now that we're seeing this this movement, you know, we're still not even to the point where like our prices haven't even hit replacement cost yet. So again, with the increase of labor costs and increases of material costs, I don't think that interest rates, if they start going like over 10%, maybe, sure, that people would stop buying for a while, especially the ones that are dependent on leverage. But again, I think you could severely limit the buyer pool, but I don't think the housing prices are going to go. But I'm not an expert in this. I'm just guessing based off what I've seen over the past couple of years, which, you know, is a fault in and of itself because I haven't lived through one of these corrections. I guess in theory I have. I was alive in 08, but I wasn't involved in real estate investing. So I'm not an expert in this. I just don't think that, since we're still on such a low end of interest rates, historically speaking, you know, I think in the high in like the 70s, it was, you know, north of 15% for home loans. But even in talking with about that, you know, to my brother, at the same time, banks were giving 10 to 12% on savings accounts, which is no longer a thing. So even though 18% sounds like a really high interest rate for a home loan, if your money just sitting there was giving you 10%, then that, you know, that 8% delta, I wouldn't be shocked. I wouldn't be hurt to take out an 8% 30-year loan, right? I think even if the interest rate is a little bit higher, it's going to impact your cash flow, but you're still going to benefit equally from the appreciation, from the principal pay down, from the tax benefits. So the cash flow would be affected, which, you know, hopefully you've got enough margin to withstand as you're analyzing these properties and purchasing them. You know, if the other terms are right, I don't know. If you're creative, I don't think this is gonna be too terrible. And in the event that it does, then again, you're gonna have a lot more buying opportunity to get new properties on the market. Nice. Good work. I hope they work out. I don't see why they wouldn't, you know. Foundation issues, I guess. That's always a big one. Would you buy a house with no parking and a small yard? Yes. Really small yard? Yes. It seems appreciation is only a real benefit if you're going to leave the property to someone. I don't think so. I don't think so at all. So appreciation is a benefit because you're able to recapture that in a refinance if you so choose. So your equity growing, if I guess it also depends on what season you're at in life. Like if you are in your 70s, then appreciation probably matters very little, especially if it's like a 1 or 2% per year type deal. But, if you're in your 50s, then you still have, I think the average life is like 80. Now, sure, there are some considerably shorter, but that's still 30 years of appreciation that you would be able to, whenever you needed cash, you'd be able to execute like a cash out refinance and tax free pocket some of that money. And if you're leveraged to the hilt and you pass away, then you're not really doing any of your heirs any benefit because those loans are still on the property. And that's money that, you can pull out and do whatever you want to with. So I would disagree with that sentiment. I think appreciation is very important regardless of what age. Because if you keep living, then appreciation can be recaptured. But if you pass away, then appreciation, sure, doesn't matter. But in that event, anything when you pass away doesn't really matter, except, giving your life to Christ. I'm a fan of that. I believe it. And there was a lot of opportunity. And I'm really interested to see what happens because let's talk about the 2007 crash. I mean, you've got Warren Buffett that says things like, if he could, he would have a large portfolio of single family homes and nothing else. But at the time when he made that comment, it wasn't really possible. And nobody ever really tried it. But then during that 2007, 2008 crash, I always get them confused if it's BlackRock or Blackstone. One of the two ended up having and building out of that crash one of the largest or the largest single family home portfolio in existence. So now that they have proven that it can be done and it can be done very profitably, then you've got a lot of other hedge funds starting to dip their toes in the space. You see that Zillow tried. And, just off the top of my head, I can think of 5 or 6 different types of hedge funds that are starting, and I say starting loosely, with like portfolios of about 1,000. And I know of, many hedge funds that have like 10 to 15,000 single family homes. So now that the concept has been proven out, I'm really interested to see if these hedge funds and all this Wall Street money kind of subsidize any sort of future crashes. Because what I think is going to happen, which is just the way capitalism works, but, us as individuals, us as the general populace, really need to figure out how to be more financially fit, more financially savvy, and start making better financial decisions rather than only being consumers. Otherwise, you've got, with the consolidation of power and all of these, massive hedge funds, once they start getting into the single family home space, then just a couple of these cycles, let's say, it's a long-term thing. It's not going to happen, overnight. But if these cycles keep happening and the hedge funds stay liquid and stay financially savvy enough to start scooping up, 20, 30,000 homes each time these corrections happen, then I think that for our like great grandchildren, if not further down the road, I think home ownership will be, a thing of the past. If you look at the places over in Europe that have been established for several hundred years, it's really pricey to get into those. So if you kind of fast forward our markets here with the longevity of those type places, then I think it's going to get really tough. And what do they call them? Flats. I just don't. America has a lot of space compared to those places, but I would say that we really need to place a massive emphasis on financial literacy for ourselves, our communities, our children, so that we are not overtaken or overrun by these funds that keep getting larger and larger. But again, I think that's one of those things that, oh yeah, depreciation. Well, even depreciation doesn't matter if you're already locked in long-term financing. But back to that finishing, that thought that I was trying to finish is, I think it's really important that people educate themselves enough from a financial and investing perspective to leave Wall Street alone. I am not a fan of Wall Street, and I think everybody would be better off if we took the opportunity to invest with our community, our neighbors, our local entrepreneurs and business owners, our local real estate investors, rather than continuing to fund these Wall Street organizations and the corporate America or whatever. Isn't equity just like taking a loan that has to be paid back? So why not get a loan? Isn't equity just like taking a loan that has to be paid back? Yes, it has to be paid back. So why not get a loan? So why not get a loan? Isn't equity just like, so you should use your equity. But equity grows and loans are fixed. So if you get a loan, let's say you buy a property for $40,000, you get a loan for $35,000 on the property. Just rough math here. You're paying down your loan for $35,000, let's say for a couple of years. Now you've got a balance of $30,000, but because of appreciation, your equity has risen. Now the property is worth $70,000 and you owe $30,000 onto it. You can do a cash out refinance to capture some of that equity. So yes, you're going to have to pay that money back, but you're going to have, an additional $30,000 on hand that's not taxed because it is a loan and it does have to be paid back. So it's not taxable income. You could take that 30 grand and you can make money with that 30 grand by buying another property, investing elsewhere. But the chances are that because you're going to be able to make money at a higher interest rate than the loan that you're taking out that's secured on your property, then you are in a powerful position. So long as you can make money at a higher rate than you're borrowing money, you should likely do so. And real estate is fun because unlike other loans on just unsecured loans or loans that are secured on vehicles, those either don't have an underlying asset or have a depreciating underlying asset. So you want to be more careful with those. But, real estate appreciates. It becomes more valuable. Businesses arguably do the same, but, the failure rate of businesses are pretty high because somebody has to keep their hand on the wheel and keep that ship running in the right direction. Had a flip that had 200 viewings on the first day. 6 months later, on a nicer house, had 0 viewings in 3 weeks. It was crazy. That is. What did it ultimately sell for, though? Did it ultimately sell for what you needed it to sell for? No way. What's up, man? Got 15 people on. Reached the bottom of the question. Go ahead and ask any questions that you've got. I'd be happy to at least give my opinion on them. So I have mentioned on multiple occasions not using your retirement funds to fund Wall Street. And when I say that is like most 401ks, most IRAs, most plans that are, supervised by some sort of custodian or financial advisor. All of those funds go to these public companies that are, they have nothing to do with your community. They have nothing to do with your interests or anything like that. There's this new thing called impact investing, which I think is really cool. And it's kind of, in theory, it puts community and, positive public change above profits. I say that loosely, right? Like you still have to make a profit, but it's just in a different in a different manner that impacts a cause that you're interested in. And impact investing is a term that these hedge funds are using that are trying to figure out how to make a return and also have a positive impact, which I think is a fantastic thing. But when we're talking about using your retirement funds for investing in real estate, I think you've really got two options available to you. So if you have a 401k that you have rolled over into like a self-directed IRA, you can use that money to do hard money loans or private loans to actual real estate investors in your community, in your area that you have relationships with. Now, there are some like forbidden relationships that the IRS does not want you to use your self-directed 401k to lend to. Off the top of my head, I think it is um, your like inline descendants. So I think like fathers can't lend to their sons or their sons' wives. However, a father could lend to his brother, so it can go sideways, just not linear. I hope that makes sense. So those can be done. That can be a private money loan on a secured property. So it's secured. It's a promissory note that's secured by a first position mortgage. So in the event that whoever you lend the money to does not do what they said they would, as outlined in the promissory note, if they default on that payment, then you go through the foreclosure process just like a bank would, and you would get ownership of that property. And that is significantly safer than having your money with, let's say, like some sort of Wall Street folk where, your investment tanks and there's no accountability there and you've got nothing to show for it. So it is more secure in that sense. And if you are the lender, then regardless of whether the property is occupied, whether it has deferred maintenance on it, if it needs a new roof, none of that is your concern. You're getting your monthly payment regardless. So if you are looking to live off of your retirement income, then I think that is the safest route to go, because on a monthly basis, or however you have your loan structured, you're getting those interest payments. So I think that's a very powerful spot to be, in a place that actually has accountability and an underlying asset. So, in the event that that loan defaults, you still have something rather than nothing, rather than a talk about, oh, well, you knew the risks, you knew what you were getting into. So, I would say, and I think my highest recommendation would be to invest your retirement funds with an individual that gives you monthly interest only payments. That way, you can use that income to support whatever lifestyle in retirement that you want. The second option available to you in using your retirement funds to invest in real estate is by actually buying the asset with your retirement fund. So let's use Equity Trust just because I'm most familiar with their systems. So instead of, let's say you buy a home for yourself, my name is Ryan Ingram. So the home would be in the name of Ryan Ingram. It would be my home. I would live in it. The property would be deeded to me. Now, I guess you could get fancier and have it deeded to a trust or whatever. But for the most part, most people get their homes deeded to their name. If you buy a property using your retirement funds, then that property would not be deeded to you. It would be deeded to your retirement account. So Equity Trust, it would be, the deed would be made out to, it would read something like Equity Trust Custodian for the benefit of Ryan Ingram Roth IRA or something like that. Now that is a real mouthful, but that property would be owned by the retirement account. So anytime you are calculating your net worth or your retirement account's balance sheet, the actual market value of that property should be factored in, um, to your assets inside of your retirement account. Now, all of the rent collected from that property goes into your retirement account, same as like a dividend would on the stock that you would hold. So that money is going to be treated just like any other money or earnings from your retirement account. So if it's a Roth IRA, then it would be taxed going in and it would be tax free as you pull it out. The only caveat to this, and my only apprehension to this, is You are not able to do any of the work yourself if you own a property that is owned by your retirement account. So, all sorts of sweat equity, doing anything yourself, even so much as like changing a light bulb, is prohibited, and you could be, fined for doing something like that. So, you also don't have those consistent payments while the property is rented. Sure, you're getting payments on a monthly basis if they make their payments timely. However, your retirement account is also on the hook for all of the maintenance items. So if that property needs a new roof, the funds have to be available and come from your retirement account that owns that property. You would not be able to, out of pocket, pay for that roof without first taking the money for the roof and depositing it into your retirement account. So, from an accounting perspective and a bookkeeping perspective, it's a little bit more taxing. Whenever I left law enforcement, I had all of my funds rolled over into a self directed retirement account. And ultimately, at first, I started investing with other people. I played with the idea of purchasing properties, but I did not like all the stipulations that came with having a property owned in a retirement account. And only because I was so young at the time, I think I was like 26 or 27, I decided to go ahead and surrender all of my retirement funds and just invest in real estate with that money. So I did pay the 10% surrender fee and all of the taxes owed on the money that was not Roth. So all the traditional IRAs or 401ks, whatever it is that I surrendered, I did have to pay taxes there. So I took a big hit. So I would say if you're looking to use your retirement funds to invest in real estate, the thing that is most comparable to investing in stocks would be doing private money loans. That would take very, very little effort on your end to do all the due diligence and to lend that money out. And you would probably make returns comparable to what you would expect in a stock market, along with having underlying assets that could be owned by your retirement account should the borrower default, which I think is a significantly stronger position to be in long term than in these in your stereotypical blue chip stocks. Ever tried taking out a HELOC on a rental? Yes, I have. I did. Um, So taking out a HELOC on a rental property is a really good option. However, I think if you are looking to continue to grow your portfolio, just doing a cash out refinance might be a better option than the HELOC. So let's go over a brief pros and cons of having a HELOC on an investment property rather than just doing a cash out refinance. So, unlike your home equity line of credit that you would get on your house, I think it has, some like 5-year draw period and then like a 10-year payback period or something like that. I'm not too suave in those. I don't have one and I never have. So I don't really have any experience or any like real life. That's what experience is. Um, in handling those. But I do know that there's like a 5-year borrowing and then like a 10-year payback period. A home equity line of credit or a line of credit on a rental property is going to be treated a little bit different. It does not have that 5-year period and that 10-year payback period. It is just it's renewable on an annual basis. So what that means is on an annual basis, the bank has the ability to not renew it. And not renewing a line of credit, and for all intents and purposes, is the same as calling the note due. So if they say, hey, you've got a balance of $30,000 on this line of credit, and we decided we're not going to renew it, that means that you need to come up with $30,000 to pay off that line of credit at the date prescribed by the bank. So that can put you in a vulnerable position if you're not prepared for that. Uh, and the banks also want to see those lines of credits drawn on and paid back on a multiple times during that 1 year period or however long your line of credit is. So they want you to use it just like an unsecured line of credit or maybe even a credit card. Use it for a little bit, pay it back, use it some more, and pay it back. They do not want you to purchase long-term assets with that line of credit. So if your intentions are to use the line of credit to acquire additional rental properties, I think you would be better off doing a cash out refinance where you get a lump sum deposited into your bank account that don't have any strings attached to it, and that nobody can call that note due if they decide to not renew it. So if you are wanting to use that line of credit on an investment property, kind of like for working capital, so let's say some pipes burst and you need to pay for that. A good strategy would be to use your line of credit to pay for that, and then as the rents come in, pay off your line of credit. That way, truly, the rents cover the maintenance and repairs or capital expenditures associated with that property, rather than you fronting the money and kind of casually recollecting it from yourself. However, if it is a really large expense that's going to take multiple years to recover from, let's say you have to spend $20,000 on a roof and a property is rented out for $800, then that is a lot of months of rent to bring that line of credit balance back to zero. So for something like that, especially one where it's going to cross that annual threshold of that line of credit, then that's probably not something that you really want to use that for. So if you get into a pinch, if you use that line of credit to pay for that roof, I would start planning on figuring out how to tap into the equity of the property that you just replaced the roof by doing a cash out refinance, or whatever property that you have that line of credit on, going ahead and doing a cash out refinance, pay off that line of credit, and keep whatever other cash that you have in equity that you're able to pull out from that property. So while lines of credits are great tools for working capital, I would not recommend trying to grow your business by utilizing lines of credits because, as Eric pointed out earlier, if the market does change, lines of credits are generally the most vulnerable. And since it's a short-term debt, then you're going to need to answer for that money pretty quickly. And in the event that the market turns, where one property will sit on the market for 6 months, then it might be more difficult to get you out of that position. So you're going to need to come out of pocket and pay that off. So I think, whereas if you were to do a cash out refinance and get that lump sum in your bank account, well, the underlying mortgage on that cash out refi is probably going to be in the 20 to 30 year range, meaning that you do not have to do anything and you are not nearly as vulnerable to any market swings that may come about. Great question, Trucker Z. 600K with no view ended up selling for 450K. So that's a big hit. I'm really sorry you had to endure that. But you're still here, still standing, and you are still thriving as an entrepreneur. So kudos to you. I don't think so. Since I haven't had the opportunity of investing through a market turn yet, that was when I was first learning. Obviously, that was one of my biggest fears is, well, what if I'm putting all my money into this real estate market and it all comes crashing? So, the stoic in me wanted to get comfortable with the worst case scenario and figure out how I would fight through it. Now, obviously, no two correction looks exactly the same, so it's impossible to plan for completely. But by people that have lived through market crashes and have invested through market crashes, their insights are most certainly valuable. And by and large, what I learned when I started talking to people that have invested through '08, some that went bankrupt in '08, what I learned from them are that, the types of debt on property definitely matters. Everything that I just said about those lines of credit, I learned from them. who they had their lines of credits called and had to come up with the money to pay those off immediately, whether the property was selling or not. And if you've got a $150,000 line of credit, to Eric's example, and you can't sell your property for the equity that you have in it, that hurts. So now you've got the underlying asset that you're upside down in that. So lines of credits are more risky than your fixed long-term debts for sure. The amount of loan to value, that matters a lot. So you always want to be 75% or lesser on the loan to value perspective, because I think the housing crash is defined as a swing of 30% or more. So in that case, it's not like banks arbitrarily decided that investment properties need to be 75% loan to value so that you just have skin in the game. It's not an arbitrary number. Their actuaries or underwriters looked at a good chart of historical stats to come up with that. And the farther you are below 25%, the safer that you are in a market swing, since a market crash is defined as 30%. If you have 75% loan to value, then all your equity, all the net worth that you've been excited about on your balance sheet will be gone. However, you won't necessarily be underwater in your investment. So 75%, let's say that the average rate of appreciation is 2% per year. I think that's a safe conservative estimate. So you are exposed on that 5%, given a market swing of 30 for a year and a half, 2 years. And then at that point, you're generally 70% leveraged, let's say, as you've got the principal pay down and the appreciation working together to decrease your loan to value. So 75% is a really safe loan to have. The other thing that I learned in speaking with investors that have invested through the housing crash is the type of real estate investments you have matter a lot as well. So if you talk to a lot of the people that were kind of accidental investors in 08, where they just kept getting approved for mortgages and moved from one house to another, and they rented it out to, like, let's say, friend or family, but they were never really real estate investors. They just were a person that had a lot of mortgages and rented out to some people in previous homes they had. Well, they got into those, at 95% loan to value because it was an owner occupied loan, or, at that time, it was 100% loan to value. So there was no equity to go around. They were not analyzing these properties based on cash flow. They were just buying homes because they could, which, nobody is doing that, especially not people that are listening to this YouTube channel. So that's something to consider. And because these movements happen quickly, then the short-term investors, the ones that are doing the flips, they will be the first that kind of get hung to dry as they're banking on that maximum market value ARV. The buy and hold investors, however, the ones that already have the 20, 30-year mortgages, are not so vulnerable to these market swings. And in the event of 2008, at least, while rents didn't necessarily go up, they also did not go down. So if you have analyzed a property for cash flow and you are cash flow positive, so long as you keep a renter, a resident, whatever you want to call them, in that property, then you're likely going to be good from a cash flow perspective. And if you can continue making the payments on those long-term debts that you have on that property, then you're also in a very safe position. So while you have short-term capital out, you are more exposed than the portfolio that you have that's already converted over to long-term debt. If you have a good enough renter pool in your area, then you are going to be fine. Hope that's helpful. Where do you see the Airbnb industry going? Would you get into that sector? I'm not opposed to it. I've thought about it. I've tried to get into it, and I say try loosely. Like I've got the idea. I have a good prop. I have a couple properties that would make good Airbnbs. But our issue is at this point of me getting into it that we are as a team running so fast to try and accomplish uh, this goal of buying 200 doors that bringing on an Airbnb would change some of our daily operations and some of the systems that we have in place, um, which would make us less effective in going after our goals. And I read this really fun book by Gary Keller called The One Thing, and I've read it probably 30 or 40 times because as entrepreneurs, as people that like to make stuff happen, especially if you err on the side of being a visionary, then having that like squirrel syndrome or shiny object syndrome of chasing after anything that looks better than what you're currently doing in your daily operations is very desirable and easy to do. So, concentrating on the one thing that you're doing seems to be the most effective way to grow a business. So, since Airbnb is not the one thing that we're doing, it is going to interrupt or disrupt our daily operations. And there's just no easy way to do it. And I also think that when all the dust is settled, we would make like an additional, two or $300 per month after all expenses and all of that from where we just normally get above market rate with far fewer expenses and overhead. Um, so it seems like a lot of extra work to squeeze an extra $200 to $300 per month when we already have the systems in place to onboard a lot of properties. So for us as a company, it doesn't make sense for us. However, I would say that if you are an investor that is looking to make the most amount of return out of your one or two properties that you have, I would say that Airbnb is a really solid way to go. I think that Airbnb has experienced some fun and unexpected benefits of everything that has been happening in the world since 2020. I think that the traveling nurses use Airbnb a lot. I think that people in quarantine use Airbnbs a lot. I think that people visiting family members that are inside the hospital indefinitely are using Airbnb a lot. So I think there's probably always going to be a need and use case for Airbnbs that pretty well coincide with all the reasons that hotels will still be in existence. Except with Airbnb, you could pay a little bit more and you could have a significant level of uh, privacy and kind of longevity. Like the Airbnbs here go for like $120 per night, which is pretty comparable to some of the nicer hotel rooms, except you also have your own kitchen, fridge, and all your cooking stuff. It's just a little bit more comfortable for about the same. So I wouldn't have any opposition to somebody telling me that they wanted to take all of their rental properties and turn them into Airbnb. But unless you have a massive amount of bandwidth, or if you are looking to grow your portfolio as you have cash available rather than utilizing other people's money, then doing short term rentals might be a fantastic way to get a higher return out of the properties and the assets that you have on hand. But having the appropriate systems in place is definitely going to be what is the driver of that being viable, sustainable, and successful. Because the funny thing about Airbnb is while the returns are a little bit more, you've got increased overhead on all the expenses like, the Wi-Fi, the cable, all the utilities, the furniture, and then, Airbnb. The hardest part about investing in real estate is finding good contractors, finding good people to live there, and uh, turnovers. Airbnb puts an immense amount of pressure on all three of those. So while the returns are greater, so is the corresponding workload. Because when you are just like a standard buy and hold, if you play your cards right, best case scenario, you've got like 11 months between having to do those three things, or maybe even 12 months, or 24 months if you get somebody that stays for two cycles between needing to do all three of those things collectively. Whereas, you might be doing all three of those things every 2 or 3 days with Airbnb. So it really comes down to more important than the amount of return that you're going to get. You really have to do a little soul search. And this is true for any business, and figure out what type of problems are you interested in having. If you don't mind those problems, then it might be a good business for you. But if you're in a business where you don't like the problems associated with the business that you're in, then you should get out of that business. Hey Irene, how many houses have I purchased this year? So far, we have purchased 26 homes, and we are buying 5 today. Just realized I missed one on my list. Buying 5 properties later today, which would bring us to 31 doors. 31 properties. It's really surreal. For anybody that's watching this that is new, I would say I just like to do a quick recap. When I left law enforcement in 2017, I was making $44,000 per year. In August of 2017, I bought my first duplex, my first property. So that was 2 doors. So I ended 2017 with 2 doors. 2018, we ended with 21 doors. And that was close. We came very close to only ending with 8 doors, but in December of 18, we purchased a package of 13 properties, which took us to 21 doors. We ended 2019 with 38 doors. We ended 2020, I believe, with 84 doors. We ended 2021 with 200. So that's some pretty crazy growth. It's very surreal. It's happened very fast. I'm really thankful for all the opportunities. So for this year, since we've already purchased 31 homes, that means in these initial 2 months, in the 4 months of March, we have purchased more properties than our entire first, really close to our entire first 3 years of business. Bananas. Absolutely bananas. And I have a lot of mentors to thank for that, of course, that freely gave me all of the information that they had available to them. And then being in constant conversations with people that perform at a much higher level than I am, giving me insight and input into my life, have allowed me to circumvent just decades of trial and error. So one of the reasons that I'm here every Friday morning, just trying to freely give out all the information that I may have, just because so many people have done it for me to help me accomplish everything it is where I'm at. Pre-2007, people just went to the bank and verbally said how much you made. One house I bought, I said I made $60K a month with no proof. I wasn't lying, but you could have lied easily. That's crazy. Let's see here. Oh, Nikki, I don't think I understand this question. How can someone receiving SSD avoid being penalized for selling their home and being financially penalized? I don't know. If someone is receiving Social Security disability and they're selling their home, how can they avoid being financially penalized? I don't know. I've never really thought through the lens of how to work those loopholes. I don't fully understand the Social Security system and definitely not the Social Security disabilities system. So I don't know how much is done off of equity or net worth versus just income. And you would think that the IRS is suave enough to know the difference between like a one-time income versus a uh, recurring revenue. But in the most non-offensive way possible, and I think it's almost impossible to not say something offensive after you set that up. And I'm not speaking to you, Nikki. Do not hear that this is me talking specifically to your situation. I am not. I'm just saying I'm going to say something in broad terms because I know multiple people and have great, very loving relationships with people that have both the Social Security income and also the Social Security disability income. And I would say that this is no critique to them, but I do think that as a nation, we have gotten a little bit too heavy on um, the subsidy sides. And one of the questions that this response is truly towards is a couple of comments that I got about people wishing that you could use your Section 8 voucher to purchase homes, and that would be more appropriate long term. And I disagree with that. And I think the very basis of that question comes from like an entitled perspective to, Section 8. And my understanding of the Section 8 system is it's supposed to help people get back on their feet that are experiencing like financial hardships. It is not intended or ever has been intended to be a long-term solution to whatever you're experiencing. And again, this is not a condemnation of any one individual, but I think nobody can afford to subsidize another person's life. And this might also be coming from a jaded law enforcement perspective when I was overexposed to a lot of people that lived in Section 8 housing. But I know many of the people were completely able bodied and completely able to do uh, any sort of hourly job. But they were just choosing to live on Section 8 because they qualified for it. So I think even if you qualify for some of these programs, but if you have the means to generate income on your own, then you should do that over relying on government income. But at the same time, government income has a place and has a very necessary role in many people's lives. So this is also not the appropriate channel to talk about any of these things. And we're not going to solve this from little Ryan Ingram's YouTube channel. I'm just thinking out loud here and processing all of the things that I know about money and all of the experiences that I've had in life so far. Thanks, Irene. I really appreciate it. The lady's in her late 70s, but she doesn't want to be penalized. I really don't know. I would ask a CPA probably a CPA that maybe even specializes in Social Security disability income people. I'm sure there's a market for that, or it might just be like a local H block person. But I'm sure that she's not the first person to find herself in this situation, and definitely won't be the last. But in order to really know about these government programs, it's got to be a full-time job. I mean, I think if you actually printed out the IRS code, then it would be taller than most people. Like the stacks of paper, So there's a lot to know in there, and it would be impossible for someone to kind of dabble in it and know a loophole or know how to appropriately code it so that she's not penalized. Mm. Let's see. All right. 10 people in the chat. Any questions you might have? Let's hear them. It is 9:10. We've been going for a solid hour. Any other questions? Let me know. I got some good comments. Let's see here. I got an interesting comment this past week. It says, wholesalers, how can I be sure that the assignable contract is legit? Signature verification is not realistic. Tips for using wholesalers. Thanks. I would say that this is something that will quickly come to light once the due diligence starts and once the title company starts doing the title search. Because the title company is the one that is going to make contact with you, the seller, the wholesaler. They're gonna have to coordinate with every single person involved in the transaction. So the title company doesn't just take the wholesaler's word for it, and they don't say, hey, this contract is legit, let's go ahead and close this entire property without talking to the property owner, right? That would be a massive red flag in a title company that is going to be very short-lived and will go out of business and find themselves in multiple lawsuits very quickly. So the title company is going to do this for you. I would not put any due diligence in trying to verify the contract that a wholesaler presents to you. I think one of the most underrated and under talked about aspects of real estate investing is the importance of title companies in that they play like on the team of any real estate investor. So I have recently turned down 2 deals because for some reason the sellers were adamant about using a title company that was not my title company. And Ohio, at least, is a kind of a buyer's choice state. So I'm the one paying the title company. I'm the one that gets to make the decision as which title company we use. And the title company is extraordinarily important in not only making sure that the deal that you're doing closes properly, but in the event that any liens or any judgments on the property are missed, then it's the title company and their errors and omissions coverage that's going to pick that up. If you buy a title insurance policy, which you should, we do it on every single one of our properties, then any mechanics liens or judgments that come across for that property after the deed is transferred becomes the title company's problem, not your problem. So we work extraordinarily closely with our title company. I would say outside of my immediate team, the title company is the main person that we speak with. The title company is the one that handles all of the contracts, the contract between the wholesaler and you, the contract between the wholesaler and the owner of that property. They're going to be the ones that, if you use private money, they're going to be working with the banks. They're going to be verifying the promissory notes. Generally, title companies have in-house attorneys where those attorneys will draft up the promissory notes if you want them to, and also the mortgages that you need to successfully complete that private money transaction. If a lender is involved, the title company is going to be working with the lender to get the lender all the information that they need. So, when it comes to contracts and making sure they're legit, or, title issues on properties, that's something that I would not recommend any real estate investor spend much time worrying about. If we have a property that has a bad contract, the title company reaches out to the person that wrote the contract and they either get it fixed or, the deal falls through. If a property comes back and it has a title issue, then the title company is going to be the one that works with the state, the vendor, the previous bank, whoever the judgment is with, and get it resolved or let the deal fall through. So the title company is definitely going to be the one that has your best interest whenever something like this arises. But I think you would drive all parties bananas if you sit there and try to verify the contract that the wholesaler presents you with. And they would definitely frown on you trying to get the information to the property owner from them, because that's how they make their money, is being the liaison between the property owner and the potential buyer. So if you were to talk direct to them, then in theory, you would have the potential to say, hey, wait, let their contract expire, and I'll buy it from you at a higher price. So I think you would find yourself on the bottom of a wholesaler's list very quickly if you tried to do your due diligence in that manner. Also got a question about private money deal structure for real estate investing. I would say that this is pretty simple, actually. So the only moving parts on the structure of a private money deal for real estate investing is getting a promissory note and then getting the mortgage. And the promissory note, you can talk to an attorney if you would like to get your first promissory note. You can look up examples of promissory notes and write up your own. Obviously, it would be most prudent to get an attorney to approve whatever document that you're going to use as the promissory note. But all that promissory note does is outline the terms and the details of the loan from the person with the money to you. So it's going to point out that it is secured against a particular property. It's going to point out the amount of money, when the money is to transfer to you, what the rate is going to be. It's going to outline the duration, and it's also going to outline what it will take place in the event of a default. It's going to outline, let's say you're late on a payment, what type of late fee are you going to pay? It'll line out the prepayment penalty, and then that's about it. So it's a pretty straightforward document. Generally, our promissory notes fit on one page, and sometimes our private investors want their attorneys to look over the promissory notes. And in that case, we are more than happy to oblige by whatever recommendation that attorney gives their client, our private investor, because ultimately, we have the best interest of that person. We consider ourselves to kind of provide a service to them, to provide a monthly interest only payment to our investor. So we want them to be extraordinarily comfortable in their investment. So that's the promissory note. And then the mortgage deed can generally be prepared by the in-house attorney at a title company. And the mortgage deed will reference the promissory note. And the mortgage deed is actually what gets recorded at the county. So that's going to attach itself to the deed. And in order for that to be removed, it will need to be properly released once paid off. But that's generally like a 1-page, 1.5-page document, depending on how much space that notary takes up. But it'll outline who the lender is, how much that promissory note is for, and then it'll just spend the rest of the time talking about like the legal description of the property that you purchased. And then it'll be signed by you and a notary. That will be recorded. The promissory note will not be recorded. So that promissory note is held locally between the private money lender and you, and the mortgage is recorded with the county for everybody that wants to look at public records to see. So the actual structure for private money and investing in real estate is pretty simple. 2.5 pages tops. However, when you go with a lender and you see their promissory note, it can be 30, 40 pages because attorneys have been paid a serious amount of money for decades to try and point out and define every single thing that could go wrong and what the actions would be. But when it's just between you and the private money lender, it should be, in my opinion, very simple. Because I don't know how you're going to go about raising your private money, but I would say the vast majority of our private money lenders do not know much about real estate investing, if anything at all. So keeping it very simple is beneficial because nobody likes an immense amount of legalese. That's why most people just tap agree when they're presented with the terms and conditions for the programs they use. Love your live videos, mix of rookie and mature questions. Smash that like button. Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. Do you have any tips on vetting a title company? You know, I would say tips on vetting a title company. This is a really good question and one that I have put almost no thought into. So how I ended up with the title company that we currently use is through the recommendation of 3 different real estate investors that I really looked up to when I first started. I said that's strange. I still look up to them a lot. So I just started using that one because they're very investor friendly. They're familiar with all types of real estate investing transactions. They are familiar with how to execute wholesale transactions. They're not deterred by unusual or uncommon events like, you know, the Board of Revisions foreclosures that are common here in the area. They're, you know, they understand how to do, you know, double closings that some wholesalers do. That's when the wholesaler buys it from the property owner and then immediately sells it to the buyer, or, you know, me or you, whoever is buying the property from the wholesaler. So that would be a double closing. So I guess my tips for vetting a title company would revolve around seeing how comfortable the title company is on working through some more uncommon real estate transactions. However, like I would say for all vendors that you use, the relationship is likely the most important part. So I would say that in addition to being very knowledgeable, they should also be very personable and you should enjoy dealing with them. If you don't enjoy dealing with your title company, especially once you start doing things in high volume, you know, if you're buying a property or 2 per month, then you're going to end up spending a lot of time in conversation with the title company and also at the title company. So making sure that you get along with the people closing, that you trust them, that you think they're thorough with what they're doing, then that's probably the best. I would say there's probably a lot of companies that do title insurance, but that is the part that protects you after the closing takes place, any of the liens or judgments that come back. So if you wanted to do some due diligence, you could look into the title insurance companies, but I wouldn't spend too much time doing that. I think Westcore is the name of the one that does the majority of hours, but I wouldn't know how to go about vetting a title insurance company. I just know that I really trust, really appreciate, and enjoy the title company that we use. So they're always extraordinarily responsive, and they catch a lot of things, and the way that they communicate with me about the issues that they find makes me comfortable in knowing that they have our best interest. I also think that it's best to use one title company rather than multiple, because there are documents that you have to provide title companies with each transaction, that if you use one title company regularly, they just have all those files on hand already, like your articles of incorporation of your LLC, your organizational documents, just by and large, your EIN, and a bunch of things that don't take that long. A copy of your driver's license. But it's nice when someone that is structuring the deal already knows all the details about your entity, the way that you do business, the way they need to structure things. It prevents a lot of uh, duplicate questions being asked at each transaction. So whenever we work with a title company that we haven't before, I would expect probably about an hour and a half per transaction of just getting people administrative documents in order to make that closing happen. So you can save a lot of time by dealing with the same title company time and time again. Hope that's helpful. Agree. We're at 11 people. Post questions in the chat if you've got them. We've been going for an hour and 21 minutes, and we're still going strong. So sorry if you've already covered this and I missed it, but do you guarantee the rate of return to your investors? So this is something that that I really don't know how to talk about, because the SEC has a large list of rules and regulations that I just don't understand. But I know that this is one of those questions that you need to be careful of answering or talking about or saying, because if you say the wrong thing, then the SEC gets mad. And I don't want to make the SEC mad, because I've got no interest in an immense amount of litigation. However, I will say that mortgages and secured promissory notes are not a security, they're a normal loan. So the promissory note outlines the terms of the money. So it outlines the amount of money, the rate that the money is borrowed at, and then it'll also outline like the frequency of payments. So all of our promissory notes and first position mortgages, we borrow money at 10%. It is an interest only payment. So if we borrow $10,000, that's $1,000 a year is what you would make, which comes out to be $83.33, repeating per month. So that promissory note outlines the fact that we're going to borrow the money. We're going to borrow $10,000 at 10% for 2 years. So that would be a payment of $83 per month. If we do not make that payment of $83 in one particular month, then they have the ability to default on whatever underlying property that money is secured with. So if they default, then they have the ability to do a foreclosure on us, and they have the ability to seize that property. So on the sense of guaranteeing the rate of return, that is the wrong verbiage for this type of transaction. I think that, guaranteeing a rate of return is something that stocks aren't able to do or talk about. But if you're talking about the terms and conditions of a loan, then I guess if you want to use that same verbiage, then it's not really a rate of return so much as it is the interest of a loan. And I think it's really subtle. And again, I'm not big brain enough to talk about this, um, and the differences between all of this. So it's not like, since the promissory note is executed at the time of closing and then that mortgage is recorded, you can't change the terms of the promissory note without releasing the mortgage and re-executing that promissory note and mortgage. So it's not like I could pay 10% interest one month and then 8% the next month, because then I'd be in default of that mortgage and that promissory note, because I said I'd pay $83.33 on that $10,000 loan on a monthly basis, and I wouldn't have paid that $83.33. I hope that helps. Frankie DeVera, what's up, man? I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody have any questions? I'm trying to go over the all the questions that have been asked in some of the comments. Hi, Ryan. Did you end up reading the random man? No, I didn't. No, I did not. I bought it. I say I bought it, and I remember buying it last time you recommended it, but I don't remember it ever showing up at my house. I'm not going to blame other people for me not reading the book, though. 12th edition? Is this a textbook? Dapper D, are you asking me to read a textbook? It's 11 hours with Audible. Doesn't look like a textbook. Time-tested strategy for successful investors. No, it's not a textbook. Hey, Dominic. Yes, there are two portfolios that are currently on my desk. One is for 12 properties and the other is for 13. So unfortunately, with the market right now, people want top dollar, even inside the portfolios. So these two portfolios, while they are, textbook portfolios, because you're buying 12 properties and 13 properties at a time, they want very close to retail pricing for both, which makes it, I guess, a portfolio, but not like something that investors would be eager to purchase. I have a friend who is currently selling their portfolio. He's got a little over 200 doors and he's liquidating a lot of them. And he is strictly multifamily, and he's actually raising his prices. He's getting above asking on all of the things that he is currently putting on the market, which is crazy. And he's doing really well for himself because he accumulated his portfolio when you could buy properties at like $5,000 to $15,000 per door. And now he's selling them around $50,000 to $60,000 a door, which is really impressive, very impressive. But he is again, continuing to raise its prices. And I know in the multifamily space, it's a little bit different than the single family because they're, especially the larger buildings, are valued off the money that they make, not the comparable sales. But, I think here lately in this market, we've even seen 4 units sell for like 215,000, some 1 bed, 1 bath, 4 units. We have a 4 unit, 1 bed, 1 bath, completely remodeled that we bought for 100,000. And we have another 4 unit that we purchased for 75,000. It's a 2 bed, 1 bath, but it needs a lot of work. We put about 30 grand into it. We refinanced that 2 bed, 1 bath maybe like 6 months ago for 160,000 is what the appraisal came back in at. So the market is increasing, especially in that multifamily space, very rapidly. So right now, I don't think that there are very polished deals to be had. Both the 12 and 13 package portfolios that I've come across, the owners of those have taken really good care of those properties. They're all occupied. They're performing really well. There's not much deferred maintenance on them at all. So in that case, both of these people that I've spoken with, I think they're going to be better off selling them one at a time or doing a cash out refinance rather than trying to sell them as a package to another investor, because there's just not enough meat on the bone to make it appealing to an investor, at least for us, because the formula that we use, is purchase price plus rehab costs is equal to or lesser than 75% of the after repair value. So that 75% of the after repair value, we can't pay 100% of the after repair value, which is what makes it not a good deal. All right. 16 people on. We've been doing this for an hour and 30 minutes. Any questions that you have, go ahead and let me know. So we've got one. I've got two. So should I use the BRRR method and the Burr method of real estate explained? And I would like to take a moment to really explain this Burr method. So the Burr method of real estate investing is buy, rehab, renovate. Nope, that's the same. So buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. There we go. Too many R's. So buy, rehab, rent out, refinance, and then repeat. So I think this was a fantastic marketing campaign. I think this was a fantastic way to sound appealing and kind of rebrand real estate investing to attract new people, kind of bring a new face to an existing conversation. But in addition to buying a property, rehabbing a property, renting a property, refinancing a property, I challenge you to tell me what else you can do with a property. You can sell it. You can kind of ignore it, kind of let it rot, and you can live in it. So there are only 3 other things that you can do with a property outside of what this Burr strategy contains. So then, it becomes pretty obvious that if you invest in real estate for any length of time, then you're going to execute this Burr strategy. So I would argue that this Burr strategy is no different than just investing in real estate by and large, just as a whole. So if you're a buy and hold real estate investor, I think that's what it's been called for a very long time, then you likely have done this Burr strategy, because the only thing that these people will kind of encourage you to do very quickly so that you can get your money back and do it again, so the refinance and repeat, is they want you to do the refinance as soon as the property is rented out, and then they want you to take the money from the refinance and buy an additional property. So, how long the contractors take to renovate your property is by and large out of your control. And if you are constantly overseeing it, if you're micromanaging them, if you're bothering all the contractors, if you view them as being expendable, if you view them as being commodities, then sure, you can sustain that pace. But you're going to leave a lot of burned bridges behind you. Contractors have life events that happen. They have things that they weren't expecting to deal with that come up. And sure, if you're dealing with a contractor that's taking entirely too long and they spend about 2 hours a day on your job and dilly dallying elsewhere on not your things, then sure, that's an issue. But by and large, that's not the case, right? By and large, it is the contractor wanting to do a good job and finding unexpected things and not wanting to cut corners. So I would largely advise against rushing contractors. So that is outside of your control. Refinancing with a bank, by and large, is outside of your control and the speed thereof. So seasoning requirements are a real thing with banks. Some banks have a 6 month seasoning requirement. Some have, we've heard as long as 18 months seasoning. So if you are working with a bank, if you've got a good relationship and you want to refinance at a particular bank and they say that there's an 18-month seasoning period, then it doesn't matter if your contractor renovates this property inside of a month and you get it rented out in two. You still have 16 months to wait in order to refinance that property so that so that you can, have that lump sum that you can repeat that process in. And also, if you buy you know, a property that doesn't need any work, you just get a good deal on it and it's under market, then that's a fantastic deal. You should, and you have the same opportunity to refinance that, pull your initial capital out, and keep on buying real estate. So I think the BRRRR strategy is great for marketing, but I think on its face, it's the exact same thing as just doing your typical buy and hold real estate investing strategy. So I would argue that it's not a new strategy, that it is Bigger Pockets' way of attracting new people into real estate investing with the best case scenario kind of strategy and expectations, right? So I think that if you're not careful and if you listen to a lot of that stuff, then you're going to put unrealistic timelines on your contractors, on your lenders, and you're just kind of setting yourself up for failure. So don't rush anything, enjoy the process, learn all that you can, and just be a good steward of the capital that you earn as you're refinancing properties. Don't go out and spend it on yourself, reinvest it, and continue building your portfolio. Find properties that need to be fixed so that you can have a positive impact on that street, on that community, and so that you can make it like a functioning unit of society again. And, um, you know, then you're doing a great service to your area, and you're going to make a decent amount of money doing it. I think it was Dwight Eisenhower. Oh wow, Dwight Eisenhower that said one of the best things you could do is buy a property and leave it better than you found it. It's that simple. Real estate investing is really simple. So be a good steward of your resources and have a long-term focus, and you're going to be a fantastic real estate investor. You don't need fancy marketing behind you. No, we would not. Would your company ever act as a turnkey provider for an investor, as in buy, rehab, and manage? Nope. Um, we don't. And I don't know what this is. Yeah, I completely agree, Dapper D. Keep it simple. Find a good deal, buy a good deal, hold on to a good deal. That good deal is going to become a better deal. Refinance that deal. So, one more question about using your retirement income with real estate or increasing your retirement income with real estate, especially if you're talking about passive income in your retirement. I would say that lending out your money to somebody that invests in real estate is probably the best deal that you can do. So, if you want to increase your income in retirement with real estate investing, I would suggest learning on being a private money lender or doing hard money loans. That way, you're involved very little in the day to day operations. You're not taking on another job of managing properties, contractors, dealing with resident issues. You're only increasing your income. So what that looks like, fundamentally is creating a promissory note and a mortgage, and then executing that with a an operator, so to speak. So finding somebody in your community that you believe in that is already investing in real estate, that already has rentals or already flips homes, and just kind of becoming the money arm for them. And that is going to increase your income however you really want it to. Since it's a promissory note, you get to create the terms if you want to get paid on a monthly basis, if you want to get paid on a quarterly basis, or if you just want to get paid, every 6 months or once a year. You are very much so able to do that, as outlined in the promissory note. Whatever you and the operator agree on, you have the ability to do it. And one of the things that I really like about this is it increases your income in your retirement account without messing with the initial balance. So, one of the common things that are taught when in retirement planning is planning on, your the balance of your account decreasing by, like, I think it's like 4% per year. Where if you have, let's say, $500,000 in your retirement account and you lend it out at 12%, well, that's going to, on the interest only monthly payment, that's going to be $5,000 per month. That $500,000 balance is still owed to you as outlined in that promissory note. So you're getting $5,000 per month, and at the end of that, at the end of the note, that balloon payment of $500,000 will be due. So you are able to live off the income while never diminishing the balance. And I think that's a really strong position to be in. And I'm afraid that the majority of people think that they have to start living off of their nest egg at some point. And you can, as somebody that has a larger nest egg or even a smaller one, it works at 50,000. You can, it's harder to live off the proceeds of $50,000 as compared to 500,000, because that would only 50,000 would only yield 500 per month. But that's still money that you can go out and spend without impacting your balance. Which, if generational wealth is of any importance to you, if leaving an inheritance is of any importance to you, then that allows you to leave more money while still being able to pay for all of your existing living expenses inside of retirement. And, just kind of the chip on my shoulder that I have with Wall Street is when you invest your money in Wall Street, technically the shareholders are the owners of the companies, but you've got preferred stock, you've got the C suite, you've got bonuses, you've got all the employees that have to be paid out before the shareholders are able to take profit. So I think that being at the bottom of the totem pole has extreme disadvantages and consequences. When you take your own capital and lend it to an operator, a local investor, somebody that you know, there's a substantially increased amount of accountability there. And also, you are at the top of the food chain, right? So you have to get paid in order for that operator's business to stay afloat. So you're going to get paid. And in the event that you don't, you're going to be able to foreclose on and take over that underlying property, which, in theory, depending on how you do your due diligence and set up your loan parameters, is going to be worth more than your $500,000 that you lent out. So, the formula that we follow is purchase price plus renovation equals 75% or less of the after repair value. So, just using easy math, if we were to buy a property that's worth $100,000, we would only borrow $75,000 against it or less, which means if we defaulted, then the investor would get an asset worth $100,000. And if it's already rented out, then that investor would collect that full month's rent. Whereas, you know, at 12%, that $75,000 borrowed is $750 per month. If the property is rented out for $900, $950, or $1,200, then you also start collecting that delta and the full amount of that rent. So learning enough about being a private money lender to increase your income in retirement is probably one of the best, most lucrative and sustainable things that you can do, especially in the light of generational wealth or leaving an inheritance to others. 17 people on and no new questions. So feel free to post your questions in the chat if you have any. Should rental properties be kept in an LLC and a trust? I don't think so. I think this is unique to every one person's situation. So I think the biggest and most important thing that you should do with rental properties is buy them. I think the subsequent liability can be dealt with later by professionals. And I think it gets easier to deal with that liability and the entity structuring as you get more rental properties. So, forming a relationship with a CPA and attorney that specializes in asset management is probably a really important thing that you can do. But I think if you are doing that with one rental property and a net worth lesser than 500,000, I kind of feel like you are spinning your wheels in a way that's not yet necessary. I think that with the proper insurance, you can successfully curtail your exposure uh, or what your liability is. So if you're properly insured, most insurance policies at this point don't really give any discounts for having less liability. So I would recommend that you get your rental property insured for the full replacement cost and also with all of the liability they let you purchase. So generally, the max amount of liability that you can purchase on your rental property is $1 million. I would not try and save money by saying, oh, I would only like $300,000 of liability coverage. Because the difference between $300,000 of liability coverage and $1 million in liability coverage may be $50 on an annual basis. So $5 a month will get you significantly more coverage in the event that you need it. Whereas insuring your property for replacement costs compared to actual cash value could save you several $100s per year. So if you're looking to cut costs, it should be on the property side, not the liability side. And if you wanted to also be really protected, then I would ask your insurance agent to give you a true umbrella. I would use that terminology. A true umbrella starts at the first dollar in the event that the underlying liability coverage does not cover whatever claim is brought against you. So let's say that, I don't know a scenario that wouldn't be covered off the top of my head. I can't, because each insurance policy is different. But let's say that for whatever reason you have a a claim that comes against you, an incident that happens at your rental property, and your insurance company tells you that it is not covered. Then, if it's not covered, you immediately become liable for whatever damages or judgments against you because the insurance company is not paying for any of it. If you had an umbrella, then that would be a second layer that would need to be pierced before you personally started having to pay things out. So the umbrella could protect you from the first dollar in the event of um, your first liability policy not providing coverage for that incident. So a true umbrella is likely going to be more expensive because it covers more and it serves as that first dollar. All umbrellas are not equal. So if you get a $2 million umbrella from the same company that you buy your $1 million underlying coverage for, then in theory, you could have an exclusion on that first million that makes it not covered. And subsequently, that umbrella also won't cover it. So I would just be very careful. And if somebody offers you a $100 umbrella, a $2 million umbrella, and then somebody offers you a $600 per year, $2 million umbrella, then there are probably substantial differences in the coverages worth you examining. All that to say, when you're first starting, you can layer your insurance in a manner that minimizes your risk so low that paying for the time and expertise of a CPA, running a second set of books, hiring attorneys, it just doesn't make sense. Now, once your net worth is over $1 million, maybe 2 million, maybe it's time to start sitting down, especially if you put everything in your personal name. Then I think that could start getting a little crazy. But you only need one umbrella, and you have to have property coverage. So even if you had a net worth greater than $1 million, if you got the proper insurance setup, you're still going to be fine, and your actual exposure to your lifestyle is going to be pretty limited. And then, I guess, you know what, I'm going to wrap this up by saying I think a lot of people prematurely think too hard and too much about all of this, and a lot of it can wait. It's good to start learning and researching online and hearing what other people have to say, but at the end of the day, nobody can really give you good advice on this particular subject because it is so dependent on your situation and your personal preferences. So if you're somebody that's not risk tolerant at all, then what I just said might be horrifying. It shouldn't be, because what I said was very conservative, but I found people that consider themselves not to be risk tolerant from a liability perspective kind of score pretty high on the hypochondriac section of life otherwise. But perhaps I'm so risk tolerant that my judgment of everything is skewed. Post your questions in the chat and I can answer them. So one of the questions that I get a lot, or one of the comments that I see a lot, either on YouTube or TikTok or Instagram, is I'm tired of working my 9 to 5. I'm getting into real estate investing so that I can make passive income. And I think there is an element of truth that needs to be told about passive income in its entirety. And I would say that by and large, passive income is a myth. And if it is not a myth, then the returns are so much lower because, as I referred to earlier on that totem pole, if you are investing in a stock, you're a shareholder. Yes, technically you're an owner of the company, but there's still the preferred stock. There's still all the employees, all the bonuses, all the C-suite people, all the company trips and vacations that get paid out before you get your share of the profit. So the higher up that you can be on that ladder, the more profit that's going to hit your hands. So if you are happy with a 3, 5, 8% dividend from a stock, then sure, go for it. But probably with a little bit of education and some effort on your end, you can make significantly higher returns. But all that to say, I think that while passive income may be true in some businesses, if you already have a large lump sum of capital to invest, then you can achieve passive income in perpetuity with very little work on your end. However, real estate investing is not a solution to that. From the time that we bought our first duplex, I was putting time into it. And real estate is one of these things that needs a lot. It has a lot of moving parts. And at the end of the day, somebody has to break their back and do the work, right? So we've got about 8 different crews of contractors that we rely on. If you are a real estate investor, you rely on contractors. If you want to do any of the work yourself, then it's no longer passive. If you don't provide any oversight, then these people that are doing the work are inevitably going to charge you too much, and your returns are going to be no different than that 3% dividend. Property managers, the same. Nobody's going to care about your properties as much as you do. And in recent conversations, I've learned that my opinion on this may be skewed, as Dayton apparently is one of the most difficult markets to find good property managers and good contractors in. I can't relate to this since I'm so hands-on. We manage all the properties ourselves. However, I will say that we have 3 full-time people. We have a portfolio of a little over 200 doors, and it is far from passive. It is a full-time job. The income is consistent. It is recurring on a monthly basis, but so are the expenses. And if we were to consider ourselves to be investors, not wanting to get involved in the day-to-day operations, then our expenses would be significantly higher. And I have a lot of friends that are out of state investors, and the contractor prices, the contractor prices are significantly higher for those out of state investors than they are for people local. I don't know what it is about being an out of state investor that attracts higher contractor prices, but it's a reality that you have to deal with. The property management companies, they are going to be the first point of contact, but they are incentivized to not necessarily have your best interest in mind. They have the ability to nickel and dime you for services that they provide, a minimum service call. They charge overrides on the contractor's estimates so that they get paid for the time spent in coordinating with those contractors. And if you have to pick, if you're the property management company, of you making money or the investor who is not doing anything to make money, well, you're in the business of making money. So the property management company and the contractors are going to, if not supervised well, if not questioned, if not, I don't want to say micromanaged, but pretty well close to, then I think this idea of you making passive income is going to crumble really quickly. And that idea of passive income really implies that there is no oversight, that you don't do anything. So if you are speaking of passive income as just a juxtaposition to your active income, then I think you might be onto something. Active income being you actively exchanging your time for money. Because while there is work to be done on the real estate side, the first of the month rolls around every month, in which case money is due. So People have the option not to pay if work is not done properly on your properties. They have the ability to pay their rent to escrow until the work is done properly. So again, somebody has to break their back. Somebody has to be out there doing the work, and it is definitely a situation where it needs oversight. It needs, what's that saying? Trust but verify. So trust your vendors are doing the right thing, but it also needs to be verified. And if too much time goes without proper verification, then your prices are going to continually increase and the results are going to continually decrease. So if you are looking to immediately leave your 9 to 5 job and become a real estate investor, it's not going to be that simple unless you already have a large lump sum of money ready to deploy. And I would say using other people's money is far from passive, because now you are becoming the operator. You are the one that is allowing other people to make passive income. But for you personally, it'll definitely be active. And there's also the stress of being a good steward of other people's money that is now going to be on your plate. So the most successful people that I know that own multiple businesses would never fathom calling what they do passive. '17th Love, welcome back, man. How often do you back out of a wholesale purchase? Also, if the estimated rehab too high, are you successful at negotiating a lower purchase price? These are my concerns for my purchase. Yes. So we don't necessarily back out of a wholesale deal often. The wholesalers that we have relationships with, that we buy from regularly, I would say either if they're not sure about a property, they'll have us walk through it prior to putting it under contract. Um, a lot of the wholesalers will allow us to, a lot of like the larger ones that are like really sophisticated, send out these emails. They have, all the fancy computer stuff. They have their little system where they send out an inspector that goes through the property, takes too many photos, and it's just really thorough. And we have the ability to walk through the property with the inspectors. And I'm sure you would be able to as well if you hear about the deal early enough. I would definitely walk through most deals that you're unsure of before putting them under contract. And then that would significantly decrease the amount of deals that you kind of quote unquote back out of. Because you would already be pretty familiar with the property. Now, if you're using an inspector and you back out of a deal based on the inspection report, I think that's also fair, because the inspection report are going to include things that you and I probably don't think about looking for as we're walking through a property. So I don't think there's anything bad about backing out of a deal if it doesn't make sense from a financial perspective. I would not worry about reputation or ego over making an unprofitable deal. However, I also wouldn't make it a habit of putting properties under contract and backing out of deals. If you find yourself doing that regularly, then you need to change kind of your strategy for your due diligence. So there's that. Off the top of my head, so far this year, I would say that I have only backed out of one deal. And that was because the owner of the property was out of state. They were relying on property managers and other contractors, and the resident there had virtually zero oversight. So while they thought they had a property that was in tip-top shape, when we went and walked through it, it was an absolute disaster. Some of the filthiest residents that I have ever seen. And there was just no way, because they were listing it for very close to not retail, but we would be paying pretty much right at that 75% of that after repair value. And in order for us to bring it up to speed, we would have had to put in that extra 25% to bring it up to value. So there was no meat on the bone for us. I backed out and just told them how disgusting of a property it is. And in fact, they confirmed that we were not wrong. So what they did is they took the property off market. They're going to evict those people and then, or just ask them to leave, non-renew the lease. I shouldn't immediately jump to the eviction route. And then they're going to rehab the property and list it again. So that's a thing. And then I would also say that, yes, I mean, the purchase price, I think the appropriate formula is the purchase price is 75% or lesser of the after repair value minus any repairs. So we went back and we offered $45,000 for that property, and we had it under contract for 65 because our estimate was it would take about 20 grand to get that place up to speed and looking real pretty again. So we tried, and they said no, they didn't want to come down that much. And that's when they said they're just going to do it themselves. So that's fair. And I would say that, depending on the market that you're in, if you are not purchase price plus rehab costs equals 75% or less, then you should back out of that deal. No shame in that. And negotiation is one of those things that it takes a lot of trial and error. I recently had a good friend of mine say that he is really thankful for everything that he learned about negotiations just from watching me. And I said, "Are you serious?" Because I thought it was sarcasm, because I would say that I am very low on the skill set of negotiations. But I will say that I do hold myself pretty well accountable to that thing that I keep saying about purchase price plus rehab costs equal 75% or less of the after repair value. Probably one of the most important things that I could say, because if you buy a property and you're all in for 75% or less of the ARV, some people would call that a base hit, but that's for all intents and purposes, from an investment perspective, I think it's kind of a home run. It's just one house at a time, just building that portfolio with 25% equity at a time. And, as you build up your portfolio where you're 75% or less all in, you're slowly building something that you are never going to have any of your own money into, which is a really cool thing to think about. You have to take action before assumptions. I agree. Yeah, man. I haven't figured out rough estimates in my market yet. I assume I have to make that call to buy or back out after I have contractors give cost estimates. Yep. I would say that you can call around to a couple of contractors, ones that are larger, that have more of an administrative bandwidth, and these are more like the retail side of companies, and figure out how they price jobs. And now in the day of software, a lot of these contractors are using the same software to judge their estimates off of. So there are some systems and some softwares that you could temporarily subscribe to where you can get pretty close to the material and labor costs of what something is going to take. And I would just start trying to dive deep there, because one of the last things that you want to do, especially when starting out, is become dependent on a particular contractor to walk through properties with you and give you estimates, because inevitably you're going to really burn them out and they're going to not want to deal with you, because, in the world of sales and commissions, quotes are free. And if you burn up too much of that free time, then you're hurting that person's time to make money. So if you can get to a point where you're comfortable in eyeballing stuff and even being on the more conservative side, so, budgeting $7,000 for a kitchen. I don't know your market. I'm just saying random numbers. 7,000 for a kitchen, 5,000 for paint throughout the house, 4,000 for a bathroom, 5,000 for HVAC, stuff like that. And then you can get a rough estimate. And you could pad those a little bit to just kind of eyeball the estimates. And of course, that doesn't include the things that you can't see or that you wouldn't think to look of, um, like layers of a roof or any sort of foundation issues that are hard to find, any sort of plumbing issues that are difficult, or electrical issues that kind of hide that are tough to find. So it's good. It's tough, but I would say figuring out how to eyeball it and estimate it on the conservative side, so with some generous padding, would serve you well. And I think, if you go to like a real estate investors networking meeting where a contractor is also there and you could talk to some of the kind of one man band type contractor crews in their off time, then they would probably give you some quick and dirty ways that they make their own estimates in their head. That way you can kind of shortcut it a little bit. Because those guys, the people that are like 1, 2, 3, 4 person crews, and the administrative side is really tough. So they don't have the same amount of time free to go out and give quotes. So I would just try to protect the contractor's time, as you are also asking them for a lot of stuff that they may or may not benefit from in the future. At one house at a time, how many homes can you realistically get in a year? I mean, our goal is to buy 200 this year. I get that we're kind of in a unique spot, and that's not necessarily advice. I went over this, so the numbers are a little bit fresh in my head. In 2017, we ended that year with 2 doors. 2018, we ended with 21 doors. 2019, we ended with 38 doors. 2020, we ended with 84 doors. 2021, we ended with 200. And hopefully, we end this year very close to 400. So we've purchased 30. Or so far this year, we've purchased 26. And in about 45 minutes, we're going to be able to change that number to 31 properties that we've purchased so far this year. Now that lot links are gone in Dayton, Ohio, what is the new best way of purchasing tax delinquent properties? This is a fantastic question, one that I've been thinking a lot about. And I think removing the lot links program was a real disservice to the community. There is currently not a good way in Dayton, Ohio to purchase tax delinquent properties. You can buy them and set up a payment plan with the city of Dayton. You can put down a $2,500 deposit with Montgomery County and do a board of revisions foreclosure on that. But in order to do that, you have to put down the $2,500. That forces the foreclosure. It has to go to auction, I think, 3 times without any bids. And then you will be awarded that property for $2,500. However, if it goes to auction, if it's bid up and purchased by someone else, then you will get your $2,500 back, but you will not get the property, which makes it kind of like you putting down $2,500 for a couple of weeks or months for nothing to show for it, right? So I don't like that strategy either. Now, the Lot Links program did have its own issues where a lot of people got in over their head because it was a very, very attractive program. But some people weren't experienced investors. A lot of people had no idea what they were doing. A lot of people, since you couldn't access the interior of the home before you purchased it, once they got the property deeded over to them, or at least to the city, and they felt comfortable in going into the property, they realized that they were way in over their head and they backed out. So now the city of Dayton owns, hundreds of properties that people have backed out on, and the city has no clear way of getting rid of these properties or selling them. I've tried to buy several of them, and in turn, they knock them down, which, I've got a chip on my shoulder, which is why I'm speaking so strongly on this, because the city of Dayton is being extraordinarily negligent in their spending and their kind of stewardship of all these tax delinquent properties. So I did a Instagram post and maybe a TikTok about one of the properties I recently went through that has $21,000 of back taxes on it. And it is so close. Like right now, it could be saved, but it's so close to being forever gone because the city of Dayton has allowed these back taxes to get so high. There are a couple companies and programs that there are a couple of companies that are allowed to purchase tax liens from the city at a discounted rate. However, they have to do them millions of dollars worth at a time, which largely is not accessible to the normal citizens like you and me who want to save some of these tax delinquent properties because it's just not a cost effective way for the city to go about discounting and handing those off. Another thing that you could do is there's this program called the Land Bank, and they have a similar program like the Board of Revisions, but since they're like a nonprofit and pseudo government entity, they have the ability to, I think, circumvent the auctions, just take ownership of it. However, they hold that property in escrow until all of the repairs are completed appropriately. So if you are an investor, it's kind of like a glorified, very ineffective layaway program where you have to put in all this money, time, energy, and effort, but it's still dependent on an employee of the land bank to come in and sign off on the property in order to deed that over to you. And it's just an arrangement that I'm not a fan of. In addition, since the land bank is the one that is the deed holder while you're doing the work, it's not possible for you to get a mortgage or any private money on that property. So you have to come out of pocket for all of the repairs. And it kind of brings it back to that initial Board of Revisions foreclosure that you could do for like $2,500 with accounting. Is why do you just want to put your money out there with very little to no secure way of like making any return on it? And why would you amplify that and do it with an entire property instead of just $2,500? So that's not a viable arrangement in my opinion. So there's that. I don't know. I think this is something that I know of a handful of people in the area that are really working hard to find solutions. One guy's really gung ho to find a solution, but at the same time, he is also trying to run a business and make money doing this. So I think his fees come out to be about $10,000 per property when it's all said and done, which, some of these properties that need significantly more work than, like some of these need like $50, $60, $70,000 worth of work to bring them up to speed. So adding an additional $10,000 just for fees to get into the property is a little steep, especially, because the market here like just increased. So it still feels too early to go spending that type of money on these properties. Now, I hope that comment doesn't age well, and I hope in like 12 months that properties are significantly higher than that. And also, if these properties continue to increase in value, then the day when just paying off $21,000 of back taxes might not seem like such a bad deal in order to get a property. So those are all of my thoughts. I hope the city is very aggressively working on a solution because I really dislike seeing a city with like 10, 11,000 single family homes that are just vacant erode on a daily basis as the seasons go by. But if a track record could, be projected forward, I don't foresee the city pulling its resources together to come up with a viable solution. So I think it's going to be dependent on citizens and private entities, like that one guy I mentioned that needs about $10,000 worth of fees. I think as they continue chipping away at it and complaining about it, being the squeaky wheel, then something might be done eventually. But right now, we are a city with an eroding housing stock, and building new in infill is not yet an option because the market doesn't support it. So we're kind of at a crossroads. However, I was in law enforcement in Durham, North Carolina, and I will say that there were vacant homes, and the time between the properties being vacant and then purchased to be torn down and new builds was pretty slim. I think it was like over the course of like 5 or 6 years. And if I had to project Dayton's growth and the increase in housing prices, then I would say that we're going to be at that point sooner than later. So hopefully this is an issue for a year or two more. And then if housing prices continue to increase and we can start justifying tearing properties down, building new structures in existing neighborhoods, then I think we're going to be well on our way to the 10 to 11,000 vacant homes in the city of Dayton being a thing of the past. But again, our economy, our market, our labor costs have to stay all in alignment, and the material costs to kind of work together to get us to the point where we can start building new. Hope that's helpful. Thanks, man. And also, great question. I really appreciate you asking it. And with that, I need to get over to the title company to close on these 5 properties. So thank you. I really appreciate everyone that logged on here. Thanks for asking all these questions. This is truly one of the highlights of my week. And we went for 2.5 hours today, close enough. So I'm proud of that. I am going to. So I've got a guy now that's helping me take these live streams and dicing them up into little bite-sized, palatable versions so that people don't have to sit here and watch the video for like 2.5 hours in order to figure out all the little nuggets that were in here. So I'm really happy about that. And I think we're going to start taking little clips and putting them on Instagram and TikTok with a little clip at the end that says something to the extent of, check out the full video on YouTube. And once that clip is put in at the end of it, hopefully people click over to YouTube and the numbers of people here on the live stream continue to grow. So really pleased with the attendance here today and all the questions. And now that he's doing that, I'm also going to be on the lookout and for all the comments throughout the week and clarifying questions on the things that he posts to answer those in the live stream as well. So I think this is going to bring some structure to the channel and bring about some real growth as people are able to just watch little clips, subscribe, and know that if they have a good question, they can just hop on this live stream and ask it. So if you don't like short clips on Instagram or TikTok that say, check out the YouTube channel for this full video, then I would suggest against going on Instagram or TikTok. What's up, Gordon? You reached us at the end. So next Friday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard, then we'll be right here, ready for your questions. In the meantime, have a great week and keep on buying some rental properties and saving money for your first purchase or your 100th purchase. Talk to y'all.